The United States women's national team are in New Zealand for their January camps. They participated in a 6-day training camp to conclude with a pair of friendlies, and their first match of this 2-game series is tonight, Tuesday, January 17th. It's going to kick off at 10 p.m. Eastern time at Sky Stadium in Wellington, New Zealand. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the history of these two teams. Let's talk about um, the United States kicking off their 2023 in New Zealand. One of the things that we were looking at in the build-up to 2023 was, after the draw, after we knew what group this team was going to be participating in for the 2023 World Cup, it maybe shifted things a little bit. So much of 2022 we saw was impacted by injury, players out, navigating various rehabbing schedules, or players who were out even on maternity leave. And it also included a really big tournament like the CONCACAF W Championship, qualifying for the World Cup process. So the energy was very, very specific. It was about qualifying. It was making sure that they were going to the World Cup. And as we got towards the end of 2022, with that draw, with those friendlies against, top 10 teams, top ranked teams across the globe, it kind of shifted a little bit. It's different once you sort of know what the outlook is for your build up to the World Cup. And something I think that's very cool that's come out of some of the media availabilities, or some of the news around these January camps, particularly when that 24 player roster dropped, was, the information around this particular camp, that, they were actually targeting a January camp in New Zealand for several months now. And so now here it is coming to fruition. And I think when it comes to maybe kicking off your 2023, your march to the World Cup, I think this is a pretty good start for them.
I agree. I think it is. There's so much planning that goes into this. And so often, historically, the January camp for the United States women's national team has been domestic. And it has faced other competition. Last year, they didn't. It was all inter-squad competition that played against each other. But this year, this sounds so silly to say, but the United States women's national team is taking it so seriously in the fact that they are headed to New Zealand, right? They're playing in New Zealand for the very first time, because New Zealand is one of the co-hosts of the 2023 Women's World Cup. They're also playing at the exact stadium where they will play their second match of the group stage against the Netherlands. That's the match that's happening tonight in Wellington at Sky Stadium. So they are emulating as closely as they can to what it will be like during the World Cup. Of course, this is 6 months before that, 5 months before that. So the weather is completely different. It's summer right now in New Zealand, and it will be winter during the actual Women's World Cup, but they're staying at the same places that they will be staying during the group stage. Remember when that was announced, and as you talked about, the U.S. then had their competition of who they were going to play against. They also had the location of their matches during the group stage, and they are all in New Zealand. That's a huge positive for the U.S. They don't have to be traveling between Australia and New Zealand, just traveling around New Zealand. So where the women's national team is staying right now in New Zealand is where they will be staying throughout the World Cup group stage. They're playing at the similar stadium. They're understanding the culture, the time change, being there, everything. It's a huge advantage for them to get this experience. We also talked about when we did our World Cup rosters and how many people would be there, if FIFA was going to allow 26 players, what was going to happen? Is it going to be 23? Vlatko Andonovski chose to go with 24 for this one, but I think that's also kind of setting the tone for the World Cup. Don't bring 26 players to a friendly if you can only have 23 going into the World Cup. And frankly, I like that mindset of his. It's really tough to make this roster, and especially if you are players number 20 through 26, that cutoff is so incredibly close. And so he's having to make those tough decisions, Vlatko Andonovski, about who to bring, and he's already doing that. But I think it's important to touch on the history of the US and New Zealand because they've played 19 times. 19 times, but this is the very first time the US is in New Zealand. Out of like 715 US women's national team games in the history of US women's national team, this is the first one in New Zealand. That's so special. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not often when you look at the very long history of matches that this team has played, how many of them have taken place outside of US
Mhm.
soil, but also like outside of those international tournaments. It's like, yes, they've played outside of the United States because they've played in World Cups or they've played in Olympic Games. Well, when it comes to just some international friendlies, it's not too often in which we find that they've played outside of the United States. Also, this is not a traditional like FIFA window, international window. So,
Exactly.
like to see that these games are a happening, but also b outside of U.S. soil is something to know for sure. But I'm with you. I like that. Uh, this essentially is something that could possibly mirror what they are going to go through during the World Cup. Uh, I think
Yeah.
it's smart to have the training camps out there, perhaps to sort of get a lay of the land, right? And then have not just one, but two games to sort of have maybe a little bit of a quick turnaround to have that experience as well. Um, the weather's going to be a little bit different for them in New Zealand when they go in July, right? Southern Hemisphere. So when they go in July, it's actually going to be winter there versus the summer season that they're experiencing at the moment. But still, I think it was cool to see that this is happening for them, and I'm excited to see how things are going to pan out. So you mentioned the history a little bit, with the United States between New Zealand. Yes, it's very cool that they're playing them in the host country, but we got to look at maybe the head to head a little bit and what we can anticipate perhaps going into these matches. New Zealand is a team, for lack of a better word, that has struggled against the United States. They do not have a ton of wins against them when you're looking at the overall record between these two teams. Specifically, the United States have the better of the record between the two teams. Now, that's not to say that New Zealand um doesn't put up, doesn't present, a good style of soccer when they go up against opposition. It's just when they've gone up against the United States that just hasn't worked out for them. Their current ranking right now on FIFA is 24, so they're among the top 25
Mhm.
teams currently ranked
Yeah.
in the world. And not only are they the co-hosts for this upcoming World Cup, so were an automatic lock to make an appearance as host, but they've had several World Cup appearances to this point. We're talking
Mhm.
5 overall: 91, 2007, 2011, 2015, and most recently in the 2019 World Cup as well. But they've never had a better finish other than just a group stage appearance. So when you're talking about going up against the number one team in the world, sort of combining the experiences that they've had on the international stage, particularly against the US, we're talking 1-17-1
Yeah.
between these two teams.
Oof.
It's not great. So I can't help but also think a little bit about the more recent meetings between
Yeah.
these two teams. We're going back in the memory bank here. If you don't want to hear about perhaps an ugly game, put us on mute now. But
Yeah.
we were chatting about this when we were content planning. We were like, oh goodness, the last time they faced them was during um the 2022 She Believes Cup, and it ended up being a 5-0 win for the United States. But it was in the manner in which that win came to life. We're talking multiple own goals, three of them all within that first half. Tough scene for sure.
Tough, tough. Yeah, I mean, this game was tough, really bad for New Zealand, and they've been struggling most recently. Yeah, I like that you gave a shout to them, top 25 ranking, being number 24 in FIFA right now. But when you look at that game that happened just under a year ago, it was during the She Believes Cup in 2022. This was a game for the United States that maybe had a little bit of foreshadowing, right? Hindsight's always 2020, but the United States opened this match against New Zealand in February during that She Believes Cup and was putting a lot of pressure on. They were whipping crosses into the box. They were putting New Zealand's defense under a lot of pressure, and that forced 3 own goals to open the match in the 3rd minute, in the 6th minute, and in the 36th minute. So at this point, I remember watching this game. I think you and I were even texting about it at this point, Sandra,
Yeah.
because we're at just over a half hour into this match for the She Believes Cup, USA versus New Zealand, and it's now 3-0 to the US, and the US has yet to score a goal. So half of me was happy. Hey, the US is winning. They're putting a lot of pressure on. They're getting shots off. We saw different kinds of lineups for Vlatko Andonovski. This is when we saw Purse starting up top with Sophia Smith and Katarina Macario, Christy Mewes, and Ashley Sanchez in the midfield. There was a lot of potential with this group during this opening 30 minutes, opening 40 minutes. But the fact that they hadn't scored a goal themselves, they were all own goals, was something that concerned me a little bit. Not in the concerning way where I'm like, let's pull players, let's change things up a whole lot. But it's like, okay, you're putting pressure on and you're getting goals and you're getting results, but how much of that is the mistakes of your opposition, the mistakes of New Zealand, body positioning, tracking back, marking runners, poor goaltending, and how much of it is actually the work of the attackers? So that was something that was a little concerning to me, maybe at the halfway point of that last match, 3-0, and you're going into halftime, but your players have yet to score a goal. That changed in the second half. We had Ashley Hatch. She gets one around the 51st minute for the United States, makes it 4-0. And then Mallory Swanson, formerly Mallory Pugh, gets one in the stoppage time at the end of that game. So it ends up being 5-0 to the United States over the Football Ferns in that She Believes Cup. And they did get 2 goals. But I think that match is probably fresh in these players' minds because we've got Ashley Hatch back on this roster for the United States.
Yep.
We've got Midge Purse back on this roster for the United States. 2 players that saw significant time in that game. Purse got the start and then ended up subbing out, and Hatch came in and gets a goal. And likewise for the Football Ferns, New Zealand has to be remembering that match. They have got to be pissed off about that match. Right?
I think it's important to know that we're coming up on almost like a year removed from that previous game in She Believes Cup.